Close your eyes for a second and imagine this. Your mind is cluttered, your skin is tired, your breath feels borrowed. Deadlines scream louder than your heartbeat. The world outside your window is burning, buzzing, begging for help, and deep inside, so are you. We scroll past endless self-care tips, expensive face masks and plastic jars, mindfulness apps we never open, detox teas that promise miracles but leave your soul untouched. What if true self-care doesn't come in a box? What if the real healing happens where your heartbeat meets the heartbeat of the earth? Today, I'm going to show you 3 real stories. Ordinary people, quiet rituals, extraordinary results. A barefoot walk through an ancient forest that calms a storming mind. A single jar of homemade cream that cleans more than your skin. A steaming mug of fresh tea grown with your own hands that teaches you to breathe again. These aren't trends, they're seeds. And every time you plant one in the soil, on your skin, in your kitchen, you heal yourself and give this. Tired planet, a reason to keep spinning. So stay with me, listen closely. And when you finish, tell me, which seed will you plant today? History 1. The forest bath that stopped her anxiety. Mariana woke up every morning as if someone had placed a heavy stone on her chest while she slept. Before her eyelids even lifted, her mind would already be sprinting through 1,000 worries. Unfinished emails, phone calls to return. The bills stacked like small threats on her kitchen counter. The deadlines lurking behind every polite smile at work. Her phone, always at arm's reach, buzzed with reminders of everything she hadn't done yet, pushing her deeper into the cycle of anxiety that wrapped around her ribs like a tight wire. She'd scroll through headlines of disasters, trends. She didn't care about photos of people pretending to be fine while she wondered why she couldn't do the same. Sometimes she'd catch her reflection in the black screen between notifications, a pair of eyes that used to be full of curiosity, now dulled by exhaustion. She wasn't old, but she felt old. Not in her body, but somewhere deeper, in a part of her spirit that seemed to shrink a little more every time. She traded another hour of sleep for another night of worry. She tried to fix it the way everyone does. Apps promising calm with guided voices whispering, breathe in, breathe out, while her mind refused to obey. She bought herbal teas with hopeful names like Tranquility and Dreamscape but left them half-finished on her desk, cold by the time. She remembered to sip. She booked yoga classes that she skipped, telling herself she'd go next week. She watched videos on self-care, decluttering, minimalism, another open tab on her laptop that did nothing to clear the clutter inside her head. When her chest felt too tight to bear, she'd stand under a steaming shower until her skin turned pink, forehead pressed against the cold tiles, whispering please stop to the echo in the bathroom. Friends noticed the shadows under her eyes but didn't ask too many questions. She didn't offer explanations. In her head it felt too messy to untangle with words. Eventually sleep betrayed her completely. She'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, counting cracks she'd memorized months ago. She'd replay conversations she wished she could edit. Moments where she'd smiled when she wanted to scream. Hours where she worked instead of resting. On nights when the anxiety was especially cruel, she'd pace her apartment barefoot, listening to the refrigerator hum and the distant city sirens. Feeling both small and enormous at once, crushed by her thoughts, yet somehow afraid of the silence they left behind. Her doctor gave her small white pills in a plastic bottle that promised rest, but delivered only numbness. She didn't want numbness. She wanted to feel alive again, to breathe without flinching, to wake up without dread pressing against her ribs. But wanting it didn't make it true. One Friday night, after she spilled a mug of chamomile tea all over her keyboard short-circuiting. Not just the laptop, but something inside her. Mariana sat on the floor and decided she couldn't keep doing this. She didn't plan an escape. There was no dramatic goodbye. The next morning, while the city still slept behind closed windows and drawn curtains, she slipped her keys into her pocket, pulled on an old sweater, and drove. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she needed to leave the hum of her apartment. The blinking red lights of her router, the endless beeps that shaped her days. She drove past the places she knew by heart coffee shops. She'd worked in corners she'd cried on, traffic lights that seemed to hold her in place, The further she went, the lighter the air felt in her lungs. An hour from the city, concrete gave way to rolling green hills and forests that looked older than any of her problems. A battered wooden sign leaned near the roadside. Shinrin-yoku. Trail, forest bathing walk. She almost laughed. Forest bathing? She imagined spa brochures with smiling models, another marketing trick for city people, desperate for peace. But something in the quiet trees called her closer. She parked her car under a canopy of whispering leaves. The air smelled of rain and pine sap, sharper and cleaner than anything she'd breathed in weeks. She slipped off her shoes and pressed her bare feet to the cool earth. The shock of it grounded her instantly. No phone in her hand, no to-do list, just skin meeting soil. She stepped into the trail, slow at first, almost shy, as if afraid the forest might turn her away. But the forest didn't care who she was or what deadlines she'd missed. It asked for nothing but her presence. Branches arched above her like a cathedral of green, light breaking through in soft beams that danced on the path ahead. She walked. Deeper, feeling each needle and pebble beneath her soles, listening to the hush of wind threading through branches. A crow called overhead, not startled by her intrusion, but curious. She stopped to trace her fingers along the bark of a giant pine, its rough skin grounding her in a way screens never could. She let her palm rest there. Feeling the steady heartbeat of something older than her worry, deeper still, she found a small stream singing over rocks slick with moss. She crouched beside it, dipped her fingers in the icy water, and watched as ripples carried away bits of broken leaves. She thought about how her mind felt like that, cluttered, tangled, but maybe capable of clearing if she let it. She lay down on a patch of wild ferns, letting the damp earth soak through her sweater. Above her, the sky peeked through shifting leaves, clouds drifting in slow stories. She didn't think about her inbox or her rent or the messages waiting unanswered. She just breathed. For the first time in years, she didn't count how long she'd been gone. She didn't measure the moment in productivity. She let it be. When the tears came, they didn't come in sobs, but in quiet streams that matched the rhythm of the water nearby. The forest held her secrets without needing her to explain. It took the grief she'd hoarded behind polite smiles and swallowed it whole. In that clearing, Mariana felt smaller than she ever had, and yet somehow more whole. Her heartbeat synced with the hush of wind, the murmur of the stream, the soft thud of her pulse reminding her she was still here, still alive, still capable of softness. She stayed like that until the light shifted and dusk began to paint the sky in bruised purples and warm gold. She walked back to her car barefoot, her feet stained with soil and pine needles caught in her hair. She didn't brush them away. She wanted to carry the forest with her, even as the city's lights reappeared on the horizon. That night, she slept with her window open, the scent of rain and green still clinging to her. She dreamed not of emails or forgotten tasks, but of winding trails and hidden streams. She promised herself she'd return. She'd make this her secret appointment with herself, a ritual that cost nothing but gave her everything she'd been searching for. She learned that healing isn't something you buy in a bottle. Sometimes, it's something you stand barefoot inside of, something that breathes when you finally stop running. Now, once a month, Mariana disappears into the woods. No phone, no playlist, no forced agenda. Just the ancient pact between human and forest. I'll bring my broken pieces.
Ow!
You bring your quiet, and together we'll remember how to be whole. Each time she returns, she carries less of what weighs her down and more of what lifts her up. Slow breath, steady heart. The hush of leaves in her ears when city noise tries to drown her calm. If you're listening now, wondering if this could be you too, maybe it's your sign. Maybe it's time to step away from screens and schedules, to trust your bare feet on living ground. Maybe your forest is waiting for you the way it waited. For Mariana, patient, steady, ready to hold what you're too tired to hold alone. Will you let it? History 2. See Lina's story. How she cleared her mind by clearing her bathroom shelf, switching plastic bottles for simple homemade natural cosmetics. Lina had always thought she was doing self-care right. Scented candles flickering beside a warm bath, face masks bought in shiny packaging promising eternal youth. Expensive bottles of serums lined up like trophies of a woman who knew how to look after herself. But beneath the surface of this ritual, she felt an itch she couldn't quite name, a discomfort that no luxury product could soothe. It started as a question that haunted her in quiet moments. What am I really feeding my skin? What am I really washing down the drain? The contradiction stung her. She worked so hard to calm her anxious mind, yet covered her body with chemicals she couldn't pronounce. Wrapped in plastic, she tossed without thinking. Each moment of calm left behind a trail of waist-tiny ghosts floating away to landfills. Rivers, the ocean. It hit her late one night as she scraped a glittery mask off her cheeks. Her ritual wasn't healing, it was hiding. And she was tired of hiding, so Lina did what felt radical in a world that loves quick fixes. She slowed down. She turned her curiosity inward and outward at the same time. She read labels, looked up ingredients, asked questions that made shopkeepers frown. She discovered that the scent she loved in her old lotion came from a cocktail of synthetics that lingered in the water long after they'd left her skin. She learned about microbeds slipping through filters, polluting fish and plankton. She learned that her self-care had a hidden cost, one that the earth was paying for. And with that knowing came a strange liberation, the chance to choose differently. Didn't throw everything away overnight. Guilt, she knew, was useless if it didn't lead to action. So she replaced one bottle at a time, one habit at a time, watching her bathroom shelf transform from a shrine of marketing to a sanctuary of simplicity. She swapped synthetic perfumes for a tiny jar of coconut oil mixed with lavender from her neighbor's garden. She replaced bottled scrubs with a handful of ground coffee from her morning brew. Massaging her skin while the warm scent filled her shower like a reminder, healing didn't have to come wrapped in plastic. She found a local artisan who made soap the old way, in small batches, the ingredients she could pronounce and plants she could touch in real life. The switch wasn't just about products, it was about presence. Every step of her ritual slowed her down. There was no rush to tear open a foil pack and smear something cold and artificial on her skin. Instead, she felt textures, grainy, smooth. Soft watched oil melt between her palms, breathed in scents that didn't come from a lab, but from living leaves and flowers. Each motion reminded her that her body wasn't separate from the earth. It was part of it. One morning, Lina took her ritual outside. She carried her small jar of oil and a bamboo comb and sat beneath a tree in the garden behind her apartment block. Neighbors passed by with curious glances as she leaned her head back, combing oil through her hair while the wind tangled stray strands across her cheeks. She felt self-conscious at first. People don't always understand softness done in public. But then the sunlight slipped through branches overhead, dappled her bare arms, and she forgot the glances. She heard birds negotiating branches above her, felt the rough bark of the tree against her back, smelled crushed grass under her heels. In that moment, Lina realized the walls she'd built around her care were illusions. The bathroom didn't own her ritual. The forest, the garden, the balcony full of pots, these places were part of her healing too. The earth wasn't separate from her care. This was the heart of it. Encouraged by that simple truth, she began to weave more nature into her daily rhythms. She started growing small herbs in recycled containers on her kitchen ledge: basil, mint, rosemary, tiny green promises that reminded her that care grows when you tend it patiently. She found joy in minimalism, not as an aesthetic, but as a quiet rebellion against clutter that clouded her mind and choked her shelves. She stopped chasing shiny new products and learned to love what lasted: one bar of soap that outlasted 3 bottles of body wash, one comb that didn't snap after a month. She donated what she didn't need, recycled what she could, repurposed glass jars as planters and candle holders. Each small choice layered over the next until her bathroom no longer felt like a showroom for someone else's idea of beauty. It felt like hers, alive, honest, gentle, with every mindful swap. Lina's anxiety softened too. She hadn't expected that. She thought this journey was about sustainability, about being kinder to the rivers, the soil, the air. But she found that in clearing away the noise from her shelves, she cleared it from her mind too. Mornings that once felt frantic became slow rituals of intention. Warm water on her face, soft cloth instead of harsh wipes, a few drops of oil pressed into her skin like a promise of care. These moments reminded her of her grandmother's rituals. Women who knew how to make beauty from what the earth offered, who understood that self-care and earth care were never meant to be separate. Lina felt herself reconnecting not only to nature, but to lineage, to wisdom carried in simple actions passed down through hands in time. On weekends, Lina explored the parks and forests nearby. She'd pack a thermos of tea and a small blanket, find a quiet patch beneath a tree, and let the wind braid its song through her hair. Sometimes she'd sit in silence. Other times, she'd journal thoughts that surfaced only when the city noise faded. These tiny outdoor retreats became her new Spano appointments. No fees, just her, the soil, the sky, and the small pulse of life that hummed steady under her skin when she finally paused long enough to hear it. She learned about Shinrin-yoku, the Japanese art of forest bathing, not as an exotic practice but as an old truth the world had forgotten. When we stand among trees, remember we are living things too. Slowly, friends started noticing the shift in her. They asked what she was using on her skin, why her hair seemed thicker, her eyes brighter. She didn't point to a brand or a miracle product. She told them about coffee grounds and coconut oil, about soap that smelled like real lavender, about afternoons spent barefoot on damp earth. Some friends rolled their eyes. Too simple, they said. But a few leaned in closer, curious. And so, Lina shared her tiny rituals, gifted jars of scrub she'd mixed herself, invited them for tea under the big sycamore in her yard. What started as one woman's quiet rebellion rippled outward, little circles of care forming in backyards and balconies, kitchens and gardens, proof that sustainability is not a trend, but an ancient remembering in time. Lina felt the old itch of guilt transform into a soft pride. She knew she wasn't perfect. She still slipped sometimes. She had bought things she didn't need, got overwhelmed by shiny promises of convenience, but she no longer carried the burden alone. Her choices became a conversation with the earth. If I take this, what do I give back? If I touch this, who does it touch next? These questions didn't paralyze her. They guided her. Her mind, once a tangled mess of anxious thoughts, learned to trust the gentle pace of her new rituals. Each small Justira soap, made by a neighbor, a sprig of mint on her windowsill, was a reminder that healing isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up for the earth the way we wish someone would show up for us. Tenderly, patiently. Honestly, so this is Lina's gift for you. Not a shopping list, not a perfect routine in an expensive box, but an invitation to pause, to look at your shelves and ask what's real, to run your fingers over what you own and wonder what it gives back when you're done with it, to remember that self-care doesn't live behind a bathroom door, it spills into gardens, kitchens, forests, moments of quiet honesty with yourself and the planet. Maybe tomorrow you'll swap one bottle. Maybe next week you'll press your bare feet into the grass and let the sun kiss your hair while you comb it clean. Maybe, like Lina, you'll find that when you care for the earth in small, ordinary ways, the earth whispers back, "Thank you. Now let me care for you too." And maybe that's where real healing begins. History 3. Hear how Ethan, a busy city lawyer, found peace in a single cup of homegrown tea, proving that real self-care can be as simple as dirt under your fingernails. Asterisk. Ethan was the kind of man who moved so fast he forgot where he'd been by the time he got there. The city had taught him this rhythm. Briefs piled high on his desk, courtrooms that smelled of stale coffee and cold sweat, meetings that bled into dinners, dinners that bled into restless sleep beneath the cold glow of skyscraper windows. The elevator. He'd catch glimpses of himself in the mirrored walls, tailored suits sharp enough to cut through negotiations, eyes rimmed in exhaustion he could never quite explain away. To his colleagues, he was the embodiment of success, smart, driven, the last to leave the office, the first to arrive the next day. But behind the polished shoes and crisp contracts, Ethan felt hollowed out, like a house with all the lights on but no one home. His mind raced through checklists, even in dreams. His heart never seemed to slow enough to catch its own echo. It wasn't that Ethan didn't try to fix it. the therapist's office, the gym at 5 a.m., the overpriced mindfulness app on his phone. Whispering gentle reminders he ignored as deadlines screamed louder. He read half a book on meditation but closed it when a client called during chapter 3. He thought about a vacation, but postponed it 3 years in a row. Telling himself he'd rest when the next promotion landed, when the next case was won, when the next big deal was signed. The truth, though, was simple. Ethan had no idea how to be still. Silence terrified him, because it meant listening to thoughts he spent all day out running. It meant seeing himself not as the world saw him, suited, prepared, perfect, but as he really was, a man who had forgotten how to breathe. It was a Thursday night when the crack appeared. The deal he'd fought for months to secure fell apart in a single email that arrived as he spooned cold leftovers into his mouth. Half watching the city blink through the window. He read the message twice, 3 times, the words dissolving into static. He slammed his laptop shut so hard the keys popped loose, stood alone in his silent apartment, hands trembling over a sink full of dirty dishes and unanswered calls. 4. The first time in years, Ethan felt a wave of something that scared him more than any courtroom loss, a weariness that threatened to drag him under. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at his kitchen table watching dawn paint the edges of glass towers in soft gold. Wondering if this endless climb was really all there was? The next morning, without really knowing why, Ethan walked past his office. He kept going, past the polished lobbies and espresso bars, down streets that smelled of diesel and fried breakfast, till the buildings thinned into old brick townhouses and tiny backyard plots he'd never noticed before. At a corner lot hidden behind a leaning fence, a sign caught his eye. Community garden, volunteers welcome. He paused. It felt absurd, him, in his suit, standing at a gate that creaked like an invitation. He stepped through, half expecting someone to stop him, but the garden didn't care who he was outside its fence. Rows of soil waited, half-turned, soft under a spring sun. Someone had left a battered tin watering can by a raised bed, where mint spilled over the edge like laughter. He knelt, pressed his palm to the earth, and for the first time in months, exhaled without realizing it. Ethan didn't tell anyone at work about the garden. Each evening after court, he'd loosen his tie, trade leather shoes for old sneakers, stashed in his trunk, and slip through the fence. He started small, pulling weeds, hauling buckets of water. Watching tiny green shoots push through dirt, he turned over with clumsy hands. He didn't know what he was doing, and at first, that embarrassed him. But the soil didn't care that he'd never grown anything except a reputation. The garden taught him by feel, how compost smells of life breaking down to make more life, how earthworms mean the ground is healthy, how a handful of dirt under your nails can quiet thoughts no verdict ever could. He found a corner patch, claimed it as his own, planted a few sprigs of mint and chamomile without really believing they'd grow, and yet they did. Weeks passed. The mint spread stubbornly, its scent following him home on his fingertips. Chamomile nodded its small white heads each time he bent to pull stray weeds. Slowly, Ethan's mind began to untangle in the hush of that green space. The city's roar softened into birdsong and the rustle of leaves. His phone stayed zipped. In his bag, silenced by the simple demands of watering, pruning, listening, he learned to read the garden's moods the way he read contracts. The tilt of leaves thirsty for rain, the shadow play of clouds promising a late afternoon shower. He swapped billable hours for time measured in new buds and moon phases. Each evening he left with dirt on his palms, and something else he couldn't name at first, a weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it was there. Now lighter somehow. One night, standing in his tiny apartment kitchen, Ethan looked at the paper cup of takeout he'd just ordered out of habit. Beside it lay a handful of mint he'd plucked as he locked the garden gate. He stared at the limp noodles, the plastic fork, the sauce congealing in a pool of oil, and pushed it aside. He filled a kettle, dropped the mint into a mug, watched steam rise as hot water coaxed life back into those crumpled leaves. He cupped, the mug in both hands, inhaled. The scent was fresh, wild, alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. He took a sip, then another, and felt his pulse slow, his breath ease. He realized then that this single cup of homegrown tea held more medicine than any prescription for stress he'd filled at midnight pharmacies. In that moment, Ethan understood what his therapist had tried to tell him for years. Real self-care is not something you schedule between meetings. It's not a luxury you buy in fancy bottles or squeeze into a weekend getaway you'll forget by Monday. It's dirt under your fingernails, a handful of mint coaxed from stubborn soil, a quiet place where your thoughts have space to grow soft again. The garden gave him more than tea. It gave him back pieces of himself buried under deadlines and old stories of what success was supposed to look like. Each sip reminded him that healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Green and stubborn, beneath the concrete weight of the city, Ethan still works downtown. He still wears the suit, argues cases that tangle his mind in knots only. He can loosen. But every evening, he trades leather shoes for old sneakers. Slips through the leaning gate, tends mint that spills greedily over raised beds he now calls mine. He brews his tea fresh, a small rebellion against the rush. Proof that peace can bloom in unlikely cracks if you're brave enough to plant it. Some nights he brings coworkers who laugh at first, but leave quieter, pockets full of chamomile and promises to come back. And in the hush of that little plot, under the city's heartbeat, Ethan finds his own, steady, gentle, human. So tonight, maybe you'll hear Ethan's story and feel the tug of your own plot of green waiting somewhere. Maybe you'll taste your next cup of tea with eyes closed, noticing each warm sip instead of scrolling through your feed. Maybe you'll run your fingers through soil, let your thoughts root in something real for once. Maybe like Ethan, you'll remember this simple truth. The world rushes by, but you don't have to. You can plant calm in a teacup. You can grow peace in a crack of city concrete. You can heal your mind, one stubborn leaf at a time, and when you do, the earth heals too. Final message, asterisk, one seed, one mind. One earth somewhere between Clara's trembling hands covered in soil, Lina's quiet rebellion in a sunlit bathroom, and Ethan's cup of mint tea steaming against the cold glass of a city window. A simple truth takes root. Healing yourself means healing the earth too. Clara's burnout didn't just need therapy rooms and pills. It needed sunshine on her face and vegetables pulled fresh from the ground. Lina's anxiety didn't fade in fancy bottles, softened in homemade scrubs, soap crafted by caring hands, and herbs that grew because she bothered to touch the soil. Ethan's sleepless nights didn't find cure in another deal closed, but in a handful of mint he nurtured with calloused palms under the hush of city towers. These are not stories about big revolutions or impossible dreams. They are stories of ordinary people who dared to plant a seed in gardens, in kitchens, in cracked concrete plots behind rusted fences. Each ritual was small, almost invisible to the rush of the world. A weed pulled, a soap bar swapped, a cup of tea brewed with leaves still breathing the sun. Yet in these tiny choices, an ancient wisdom woke up, the reminder that our bodies and the planet share the same fragile roots. When we suffocate the earth with plastic and noise, we suffocate our minds. When we strip the soil of life, we rob ourselves of calm. But when we tend the ground, we tend the garden inside too. The beauty of this truth is that it belongs to all of us. You don't need acres of land or years of experience. You need a windowsill for a sprig of basil, a mason jar for kitchen scraps, turned compost, a morning walk where your bare feet meet wet grass. You need to taste your food slowly, read its story, thank the hands that grew it. You need to pause long enough to notice how silence feels softer near trees, how your thoughts grow kinder when your hands grow things. Clara, Lina, Ethan, Day didn't run to the wild edges of the world to find peace. They grew it in tiny corners no one else believed could bloom. Asterisk, and maybe now it's your turn. Maybe this is the moment you close your eyes, take a breath deeper than the notifications on your phone. Promise yourself something small, yet powerful, to care a little more for what you touch, to waste a little less of what gives you life, to swap one thing, just one, for something gentler on your mind, softer on the soil, to remember that every leaf you tend, every ritual you make sacred, is not just for you. It's a thank you whispered back to the earth that holds you even when you forget to notice. One seed, one mind, one earth. It starts here. So if these stories moved something in you, share this message. Plant a thought in someone else's mind today. Pass on a jar of herbs. Invite a friend for tea under a tree. Show your neighbor your tiny compost bin. Use your voice for the green that cannot speak. The soil is waiting. The rivers are listening. Our own breath longs to slow down. Let's grow this revolution softly but stubbornly together. Like Clara, like Lina, like Ethan, be the hands that heal yourself and the earth at the same time. Hashtag grow inside a laced.